Hello, everyone. This is Pastor Roland, checking in to see how you're doing. Hope you're doing better. Today, I want to read you something very beautiful from the book of Joel in the Old Testament, the prophet Joel. But first, I want to introduce the topic to you, and the topic is repentance. Turning from one's errant ways, turning back to God. You see, getting right with God, that's the expression that you've heard. I'm sure you've heard that before. It's not so much not doing this particular thing or not doing that particular thing or not doing this or that particular thing. You know, people struggle. They struggle with smoking, with their marijuana, with drinking, with cussing, with being angry, with spending too much money, with yelling at their kids, with looking at naughty things, with bad thoughts. People just struggle with so many things, okay, that they're doing that they know aren't right. Wasting time, for example, or they struggle with working too much and not being home enough for their family. Or on the other hand, they're struggling with not being able to find a job. There's just so many things that people struggle with. Okay, these people struggle with wrong companions. Okay, a lot of us, when we were young, we were rebellious. We rebelled against wrong authorities, and then we fell in with a rebellious crowd, and then we ended up getting in trouble doing things that they did. But when we fell in with that crowd, we became dependent on them for support for what we had become. And then, what's the old expression? You can take the country out of the boy, but you can take the boy out of the country, but you can't take the country out of the boy. Have you heard that expression? You can take the boy out of the country, but you can't take the country out of the boy. Well, it's a very similar thing with everything. You can take the wrong food, take the boy away from the wrong food, but you can't take the wrong food away from the boy. In other words, he still will want to go back. Whatever it was in the past that was not good for him, that he misused somehow. Okay, whether it be donuts, or the peer group, or some drug, or some wrong person to be around. See, it gets into you, and then you find yourself wanting to go back again. See, a lot of people, for example, they get out of prison. Then what happens before long? They end up going back to the same old, same old. So anyway, the point is, people struggle with so many things, but getting right with God, see, it's not any particular thing like giving up one thing or giving up another thing. Although if you get right with God, then you will give them up. They'll give you up. See, you won't have to struggle anymore. They'll just give you up. I'll never forget when I used to work downtown financial district. There was a man there, a nice man. His name was Ed, and he smoked a pipe. And this was a long time ago when people would smoke in the office. Okay, well, he smoked a pipe a lot every day, quite a lot. And then he started to become a bit more health conscious, and he would go out jogging and walking and so on and so forth. But anyway, one day people began to notice that he wasn't smoking the pipe anymore. So they asked him. He said, "Well, I just quit." And they said, "Well, what happened?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "One night I was sitting in the living room and I just took all my pipes and threw them into the fireplace and never smoked again." See? So smoking gave him up. Smoking gave him up. So there was no big struggle. It just gave him up. So if you could get right with God, then you would find that sort of thing happening in your life, where things that previously you had struggled with and tried to give up and couldn't, now they give you up. So here's what I want to say. Getting right with God, it's like a change in attitude. It's a change in orientation or inclination. It's a change in inclination of the soul. Before the time of beginning of repentance, the soul inclined toward what was wrong because the soul was prideful and the soul was naughty and concupiscent. And the soul compulsively leaned toward what was wrong, which we do that naturally anyway. If you get a kid and then you offer the kid a carrot or a piece of candy that tastes, carrot candy, he'll go for the carrot candy every time. That's just the way we humans are. We sin compulsively, we err we're inclined toward it. It's called concupiscence. It's called being born in sin. But then we add our own sins on through our own pride and resentments and angers and so forth. And then we need to comfort ourselves, and we start finding wrong companions and wrong food and wrong substance. You see what I mean? But the point is that getting right with God is a change in the soul's inclination. So instead of inclining toward the lie, see, we always like to lie. The lie that excuses what you did, excuses who you are. See, the lie that justifies you, the lie that assures you and reassures you. See, and the comfort that reassures you, they're all lies. See? And so we inclined toward the lie. We didn't like the truth. The truth seemed hard and cold, see, in our erring condition. So anyway, when the day comes that now the soul inclines toward the truth, see, instead of inclining toward the lie, the soul now, there's a delicate pivot. And it also involves belief. It's a pivot point. All of a sudden, instead of believing the lie, the soul now doubts the lie and believes the truth. Okay? And then from that delicate change in inclination, the life changes completely for the better. It begins on the inside. See, we change from the inside. It begins in the soul. Okay? So when will that happen? When will that happen? I don't know. But when you're ready, when it's time, then it will happen, and not a minute, not a second sooner. But if you get right with God, getting right with God begins with that delicate, that change, that little change in orientation from leaning a little bit toward the lie, a little bit toward error and wrong, and now leaning a little bit toward the truth. See? So now the soul is ready to face, wants to know the truth, wants to come clean. See? Wants to come clean. Not to other people, but before God, inside. To stop living a lie. See? So now, that soul now, properly inclined, life will change completely. And you get an assist from God. Now you don't have to struggle with things anymore. In due time, they will sort themselves out. In due time, things will give you wrong things that are harmful to you will give you up. Beginning with the most recent ones acquired, and then eventually all the way back to the earliest, the deepest ones, often involving, for example, food. Food and sex are the life supports that sustain the fallen creature. So a lot of times those are the last ones to go. But very soon, things like smoking and excessive and drinking and things like that will just give you up, okay? Without any effort on your part. So getting right with God is a change of heart, a change in inclination, as I describe it, and also a change in belief, from doubting truth and believing a lie to now doubting a lie and believing the truth. See, now getting right with God is a very important thing. Very important. Now I want to read you what the prophet Joel said. This is what God said through Joel. This is God through Joel. This is from the book of the prophet Joel. God says, "Yet even now declares the Lord, return to me with all your heart, and with fasting, weeping, and mourning, and rend your heart and not your garments. Now return to the Lord your God, for he is gracious and compassionate, slow to anger, abounding in loving kindness, and relenting of evil. Who knows whether he will not turn and relent and leave a blessing behind him? Okay? So what is this saying is God says, if you will turn to me, okay, with all your heart, okay, and rend your heart and not your garment. See, there was a custom back then that they would, when they were sorrowful over something or repenting over something, they would rend their clothes, rip their clothes. Now he says, rip your heart instead of your garments. Now return to the Lord your God, for he is gracious and compassionate, slow to anger, and abounding in loving kindness, and relenting of evil. In other words, he was perhaps about to turn away from the nation, see, or a person, and withdraw his protection and his blessing, see, which would not be good. But now, maybe it says here, who knows whether he will not turn and relent? In other words, change his mind and not turn away, but remain protecting and blessing the person, and leave a blessing behind him. Is this not a beautiful thing? It's like a hint from God. It's like he's saying, look, who knows, maybe I'll change my mind and leave a blessing. See, it's very beautiful. Very, very beautiful. It's Joel 2, second chapter, verse 13, verse 12 through 14. It's very beautiful. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. So I hope that you might turn from, there's things to turn from. One of them is being resentful. See, being phony, being impatient with your children. See that there's something wrong with being impatient with your children. See that there's something wrong with resenting other people and judging them. Regret the way you are, okay? And God will hear your silent cry of your soul, and then he will help you, okay? My name is Pastor Roland.